Hi everyone, my project is on performance anxiety in choral students. I was drawn to this topic because I myself experienced performance anxiety as a choral student, both in high school and in my undergraduate degree. Also, many of my students have experienced performance anxiety. Some of them, it's become debilitating for them because as in they had to drop out of a couple of performances before, and that affects them individually and it affects the group as a whole. And so I would like to better understand performance anxiety and understand how to cope with it. Performance Anxiety and the Very Young Musician is the first article I researched. I was drawn to it because I would like to know when performance anxiety begins for most musicians. Many adult musicians suffer from performance anxiety. Mostly the research has been about instrumentalists, some of them claiming to have debilitating performance anxiety to the point where they have to take medication or see therapists. Anxiety is a topic of concern for musicians even in the elementary years. A couple of studies have been conducted on students as young as third grade and fourth grade. It was suggested that they did experience performance anxiety at that age. So this led other researchers to suggest that anxiety was linked to testing anxiety. Performance anxiety was linked to testing anxiety. However, that's a bit of a controversial issue because testing anxiety stems from standardized tests, written tests, which are both very private and personal experiences. And music performance is usually a social concept. You're in front of an audience. A lot of times, especially at that age, you're with an ensemble or choir. Also, testing does not begin until the second or third grade typically, when performances oftentimes begin, especially in churches and daycares, sometimes as early as 2 or 3 years old. So those are very different situations, which is why it's a controversial issue. It is a common belief that young children do not experience performance anxiety, despite many indicators that students are under stress during the performance. I used to teach elementary school. I teach high school now, but I had many students get very upset and cry, or simply not participate once we got to performance time, or just sit down on the stage, which are all indicators that they're under stress. So I think it's something that should not be ignored. Little research has been conducted on performance anxiety in children, and that is the gap that this study intends to fill. The current study investigates young children in anticipatory stress, physiological stress, behavioral signs of stress, and relation of prior performance experience on current performance anxiety. So in order to do this, 66 3 and 4-year-olds from 2 daycares in France took 10 weeks of music classes, followed by 2 performances. So each daycare gave 2 performances on the same material on 2 consecutive days. So the same exact performance twice. Data was gathered from videotaped lesson and both the performances. The videotaped helped researchers observe stress behavioral signs of stress, maybe crying or kicking their leg or not performing. Cortisol secretions in saliva were taken, one was taken after a lesson and the other was taken, the other 2 were taken after each performance, and they were compared for cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone, so cortisol levels are higher if one is under stress. Self-reports were given by each student because the kids were so young. The questions were given in picture form. For instance, they would have a picture of a little girl singing and say, "This girl is a good singer." And they would have a picture of another girl singing and say, "This girl is a bad singer." And they would ask the student to identify with one of the pictures. And the data was also gathered from a parent questionnaire which dealt with past performance experiences. The results indicated that 3 and 4-year-olds can indeed experience performance anxiety. Cortisol responses in the saliva indicate that music performance could be a low stress event. Low stress was compared to a high stress event. The example that was given in the article was having blood drawn from your feet, which would be a very high stress event for me, I know. So it's good to know that music performance was a low stress event. More nervous behaviors were observed at the first concert than at the second, which indicated or suggested that multiple performance experiences could help and result in less performance anxiety. That was also evident in cortisol responses. There was less cortisol secretion in the second performance than in the first. So that also shows that maybe more performance experiences are necessary. Also, prior performance experience did not result in lower cortisol levels at the first performance, stating that at that young of an age, that prior performance did not have an effect on how nervous or anxious they got for the current performance. My second article was Performance Anxiety in Gifted Adolescent Musicians. Like I said in the last article, most research has been conducted on adult musicians, and this one focuses mostly on adolescents. Some scholars distinguish between low and high grades of performance anxiety. Low grades, some people consider a low grade of anxiety necessary for music performance, and then high grades of performance anxiety could result in being debilitating for some people. Performance anxiety is classified as a variant of social phobia. Also, like I said in the last article, music performance is a social event. So having a fear, a nervousness, or an anxiety about that would classify it as a social phobia. Much attention has been given to situational factors of performance anxiety, such as audience sizes, performance areas, performance spaces, expectations put on the performer by their peers or by their conductors or teachers. And then many adult musicians use medication as a coping strategy, and so it was of an interest to study the use of medication by adolescents. In order to study adolescents, 74 German high school students were given a questionnaire. These students were from a school that specialized in music education. The questionnaire included 20 statements about physical and physiological effects of anxiety. One of the statements could have been, "My stomach tightens up when I walk on the stage." At that point, the student would rate the statement on a 5-point Likert scale on how often or frequent it happens. Extra questions were added to the questionnaire to investigate coping strategies of students, the situational factors that influence the anxiety levels, and then unmet needs for coping assistance. The results showed that pre-college students do indeed experience significant amounts of performance anxiety. Some students even reported that anxiety levels negatively impact their musical careers, which is that statement has a huge impact on me because those students specifically go to school to study music, and mine do not. So if those students are nervous, then I know that mine are. And another important takeaway from this article was that students called for more assistance with coping strategies. It was suggested that educators or conductors give more time to addressing performance anxiety and also allow for the students to discuss performance anxiety in order to become more comfortable with it and learn how to cope with that type of stress. My third article is an investigation into the choral singer's experience of music performance anxiety. Most research in performance anxiety is on adult instrumentalists. So this article sparked my interest because it was about choral singers specifically. Some performance anxiety is good. I believe I heard Eric Whitaker at one point say something, of course this is paraphrased, but he said the moment that you walk on stage and don't feel any type of anxiety is the moment that you need to stop being a musician. So a lot of people and researchers believe that a low amount of performance anxiety is necessary in order to perform at your best ability. Put a little pressure on, if you will. Teachers and coaches in other fields have been linked to anxiety levels. For instance, a coach's attitude and the pressure that they put on a student could affect their anxiety level, which therefore affects their performance on the field. And then very little research has been conducted on singers or choir members, and little research has been conducted on the effect of the conductor on the choir member. This study's purpose is to explore the experience of performance anxiety in semi-professional chorus members. Specifically, the frequency and severity of anxiety is studied, relationship of anxiety and career performance choice. So how did their anxiety affect their career choice and how they choose to perform, like solo or ensemble. The role of the conductor on the level of performance anxiety and the coping mechanisms. The survey to investigate all of those factors was sent to 7 semi-professional choirs. They were choirs that had competed. They commonly performed masterworks, and some of them were paid, so they were in fact very knowledged singers. 201 singers ended up participating in the survey. The survey was created for this study, and it includes questions on the performance history, experience with past conductors and current conductors, and the use of performance aids such as coping mechanisms and things of that sort. The results of this study showed that more than half of the singers reported performance anxiety. Most of it was moderate anxiety, and I believe 7% of the reported anxiety was severe or debilitating. It was also stated that past experience rather than age affected anxiety. It was found that most music majors and people that had a lot of experience with intense choral concerts didn't experience performance anxiety as frequently as people with less experience. It was also noted that conductor behavior was a common source of performance anxiety. Some of the comments that were made on the survey stated that the conductor can make or break a performance, and that the conductor single-handedly controls the attitude and the outcome of the performance. So that is something to keep in mind, especially in terms of facial expressions and nonverbal body language. I'm a definite convictor of those crimes. Here are the references and a brief recap. The performance stress in the very young musician suggested that 3- and 4-year-old musicians can experience performance anxiety, and it also indicated that multiple performance experiences could assist in less performance anxiety. The second article about adolescent musicians suggested that the conductor or director could take more time to address performance anxiety and maybe suggest coping strategies that could assist students and singers on stage. The third article suggested that the majority of singers are affected by performance anxiety, and that the conductor plays a large role in the amount of anxiety experienced by singers in the choir. So I hope that this helps with some of you, and I look forward to hearing the rest of your research. Thanks.